The package was small, no bigger than a shoebox, but it weighed heavily in Gabriel's hands as he stepped into the grand hall of the floating city. It was the kind of place that made you feel like you were in a dream, a perfect blend of futuristic technology and ancient architecture. The walls of the ballroom shimmered with holographic displays, and the ceilings stretched high, adorned with golden lights that danced like stars. Guests in formal attire wandered around, engaged in quiet conversations, their laughter like music in the air. Gabriel wasn't the kind of guy who typically attended high-profile events like this one. His job was simple: a courier for high-priority deliveries that most people never saw. But today was different. Today, he had been asked to drop off a special package for one of the most powerful families in the galaxy, the Varn family. They were known for their wealth, influence, and connections to the ancient vampire dynasty that had long been shrouded in secrecy. As he walked across the polished floor, his boots making soft thuds, Gabriel couldn't help but feel out of place. He wasn't used to the glitz and glamour of the rich and powerful. His world was more grounded, delivering packages, staying low-key, and avoiding trouble. But this delivery was different. The package he carried was rumored to contain something ancient, something valuable enough to change the balance of power in the galaxy. It wasn't just a wedding gift, it was a relic tied to a long-lost vampire civilization. He made his way to the front of the ballroom, where the bride and groom were expected to stand. They were both from prominent families, and this union had been planned for years. But it wasn't the wedding that caught Gabriel's attention, it was the eyes of the people around him. There was something cold in the way they looked at him, something that made his skin crawl. But he wasn't here to be part of the celebration. He was here for one thing: deliver the package and leave. He approached a tall, elegant man standing near a large, floating display, his hands clasped behind his back. Gabriel cleared his throat. "I have a delivery for the Varn family," he said, his voice steady despite the unease creeping up his spine. The man, tall and imposing, turned his gaze to Gabriel. His eyes were sharp, piercing, as if he could see right through him. He gestured for Gabriel to follow him, leading him through the crowd of guests. As they passed through the crowd, Gabriel couldn't help but feel the weight of the eyes that followed them. People in the room knew something he didn't, and it made him feel like an outsider. The man led him to the side of the ballroom, where a group of individuals stood in quiet conversation. Among them, Gabriel's gaze fell on a woman who stood apart from the others, her presence commanding attention. She was tall, regal, with silver-white hair that cascaded down her back like a waterfall of moonlight. Her face was pale, almost ethereal, and her eyes glowed with a faint, otherworldly light. Gabriel had seen many powerful people in his line of work, but this woman was different. She exuded an aura of ancient power, a presence that felt both alluring and dangerous. She was dressed in a long, flowing gown of deep crimson that seemed to shimmer with the light of the room. Gabriel froze for a moment. He knew who she was: the vampire princess. Her reputation preceded her, and for good reason. She was the heir to one of the most feared vampire dynasties in the galaxy, a family that had long since retreated into the shadows, pulling the strings of power from the darkness. The princess had been absent from the public eye for years, but here she was, standing right before him. She smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made Gabriel's heart skip a beat. Without a word, she stepped toward him, her movements graceful and fluid, like she was gliding across the floor. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers cold but firm. "Dance with me," she said softly, her voice smooth and hypnotic, like the sound of velvet. Gabriel's mind raced. He had heard the rumors about the vampire princess. She was known for her beauty, her power, and her ability to control minds with a single glance. No one ever said no to her, at least, not if they valued their lives. But something about her made Gabriel pause. It wasn't just her beauty or her presence. It was the way she looked at him, like she already knew everything about him. Every secret, every thought. And there was something else, something that pulled at him, as if fate itself was guiding his steps. He glanced down at the package in his hand. The delivery. That was what he was here for. He wasn't here to dance with the vampire princess. but the words slipped out before he could stop them. "Okay," he said, his voice low but steady. Her smile widened, and she led him toward the center of the ballroom, where the music was playing. The crowd parted to make way for them, as if they were parting for royalty. Gabriel felt a strange sense of inevitability in the way the princess moved, like the entire universe had aligned for this moment. They reached the center of the dance floor, and the music seemed to change, growing more intense, more enchanting. The princess raised her arms, guiding him into the dance. Her movements were so fluid, so precise, that Gabriel had no choice but to follow her lead. His feet moved automatically, as if his body had been trained for this moment his entire life. As they danced, Gabriel couldn't help but feel an odd sense of connection. There was something about her, something that pulled at him, like he was meant to be here, meant to be with her. He could feel the eyes of the guests on them, but he no longer cared. In that moment, it was just the two of them, moving together, lost in the music, lost in the dance. The princess's voice broke the silence between them, soft but full of hidden meaning. "You carry more than just a package, don't you, Gabriel?" Gabriel's heart skipped a beat. How did she know his name? How did she know so much? Her eyes met his, and in them, he saw something ancient, something that belonged to another time, another world. It was as if she had been waiting for him, waiting for this moment, for him to arrive and fulfill some long-forgotten destiny. "You were born for more than just delivering packages," she continued, her voice like a whisper in the back of his mind. "You were born to carry the weight of the galaxy." Gabriel shook his head, trying to push the thought away. This was ridiculous. He was just a courier. He had no destiny beyond making deliveries and getting paid, but the princess's words lingered in his mind, like an echo in the back of his skull. Before he could respond, a loud crash rang out from across the ballroom, and the lights flickered. Guests screamed and scattered, but the princess didn't flinch. Her grip on his hand tightened, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the room. "We are not alone," she murmured, her voice now cold and sharp. "The real danger has arrived." The ballroom descended into chaos as the lights flickered and then went out entirely, plunging the room into darkness. Screams filled the air, and Gabriel felt a chill run down his spine. It wasn't just the blackout, it was the way the princess reacted. While everyone else was panicking, she stood perfectly still, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. He couldn't explain why, but a strange calm washed over him. Her hand, still gripping his, was cool to the touch, like the very essence of the night itself. Without a word, she began to move through the crowd, effortlessly weaving between people who were now running in every direction, desperate to escape whatever threat had entered the ballroom. Gabriel followed her, the package still clutched tightly in his hands. A low, guttural growl echoed through the darkness, and Gabriel felt his heart race. The sounds grew closer. Footsteps, heavier and quicker, pounding against the floor like a storm. He could almost feel the air shift, like something dark was taking shape. The princess's pace quickened, and Gabriel had no choice but to keep up. They reached the far end of the ballroom, where a door leading into a narrow hallway stood ajar. "Move quickly," the princess whispered, her voice cold and controlled. Gabriel didn't hesitate. He followed her through the door and into the hallway. The corridor was dim, lit only by the faint glow of emergency lights that flickered weakly against the walls. The princess led him down the hall, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor, echoing in the otherwise silent space. They reached a small side room, the door barely cracked open. The princess pushed it open with ease, glancing over her shoulder to make sure they weren't followed. Gabriel entered the room, his breath coming in short bursts from the rush of adrenaline. He set the package down on a nearby table, his eyes still scanning the hallway, his mind racing with questions. "What's going on?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse. The princess turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "You have the artifact, don't you?" she asked, her tone steady but laced with a hidden urgency. Gabriel blinked, confused. "I'm just delivering a package. I don't know what's inside." The princess stepped closer, her gaze locking onto his. You were chosen to carry it. That package is not just a wedding gift. It's far more important than that. He shook his head. I don't understand. Her eyes softened for a moment, and she placed a hand on his shoulder. You will. But first, we need to get out of here. Just as she finished speaking, the door to the room slammed open with a force that shook the walls. A group of figures stepped into the room, tall, with pale, gaunt faces and eyes that burned like coals. Gabriel's stomach turned as he realized who they were. Vampires. Not the elegant, controlled creatures of legend, but something darker, something more savage. The princess stepped in front of Gabriel, her posture rigid. No, she said, her voice cold. This is not your fight. One of the vampires, a man with long, black hair and a cruel grin, took a step forward. His voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it. We're not here for a fight, princess. We're here for the artifact. Gabriel instinctively stepped back, his heart pounding in his chest. The vampire's eyes turned to him, and for a moment, he could feel the weight of their gaze, like they were searching for something deep within him. The princess didn't move, standing between him and the approaching threat, as if she were the calm at the center of a storm. You won't get it, she said firmly, her voice unwavering. Not from him, the vampire laughed, a low, mocking sound. You think you can stop us, princess? You've been hiding in the shadows for far too long. Gabriel's mind raced. He had no idea what was going on. He was just a courier. He was supposed to deliver a package, not get caught in the middle of some vampire war. But the more he looked at the princess, the more he understood that this wasn't just any wedding. This wasn't just any delivery. The vampire in front of him turned his attention back to Gabriel. Hand over the package, he demanded, his voice hard. Now. Gabriel swallowed hard, his mind spinning. The package. It was clear now that it held something important. But what? And why was he the one carrying it? He had no answers. Only confusion and fear. But he didn't want to give it to them. Something told him that if he did, it would be the end of everything. Gabriel, the princess said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Trust me. Do not open the package. You must not give it to them. The vampires stepped closer, and Gabriel's heart raced. He didn't have much time. His eyes flicked to the princess, who stood poised like a statue, ready to strike at any moment. The air in the room seemed to thicken. And Gabriel realized something: these vampires weren't ordinary creatures. They were older, more powerful, and their hunger wasn't just for blood. The vampire leader took another step toward him, his lips curling into a grin. You don't have a choice. Hand it over. Now. Suddenly, the princess moved. It was so fast that Gabriel barely had time to react. She was on the vampire leader before anyone could blink. Her movements a blur of grace and power. With a single, fluid motion, she drove a sharp object into his chest. The sound of the impact was like a thunderclap in the small room, and the vampire gasped, his expression one of shock and fury. The other vampires froze for a split second, giving the princess just enough time to turn to Gabriel. Run! She shouted, her voice fierce and commanding. Gabriel didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed the package from the table and bolted for the door. As he ran down the hallway, he heard the vampires behind him, their footsteps growing louder, closer. He had no plan, no idea where he was going. He was just running, desperate to escape. He rounded a corner and found himself on the edge of a balcony, overlooking the dark expanse of the floating city below. His breath came in ragged gasps as he tried to steady himself. The city stretched out before him, its glowing lights twinkling like stars in the vast night sky. Behind him, he heard the vampires approaching, their footsteps heavy and determined. But then, something strange happened. The princess appeared beside him, her form suddenly materializing out of thin air. She had vanished from the hallway, only to reappear here, her presence like a shadow that clung to the walls. They're coming, she said, her voice tight with urgency. We need to move. Gabriel turned to face her, the weight of the package still heavy in his hands. Where do we go now? The princess's eyes were focused, calculating. We're not far from the escape pods. We'll take one. Get out of here. And then we'll figure out what to do next. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and Gabriel knew they didn't have much time. He looked down at the package, then back at the princess. This was no ordinary delivery. This was the start of something far bigger than he ever could have imagined. He had no choice but to trust her. He didn't know what the artifact was, or why they were after it. But whatever it was, he had a feeling that it would change everything. The escape pods were located on the lower level of the city, beneath layers of gleaming walls and high-tech barriers designed to protect the rich and powerful. Gabriel could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him as he followed the princess through the narrow corridors. The city was alive with movement, but there was no joy in it now. The elegant lights and shimmering displays that had once made the floating city feel like a dream now seemed like a mockery, as if the beauty of it all had been built on lies. Gabriel glanced at the princess as they moved. Her movements were swift, precise, as though she had done this many times before. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed the underlying tension, like a storm just beneath the surface, waiting to erupt. We're almost there, she said, her voice low and steady. But Gabriel could hear the faintest hint of urgency in her tone. The sounds of pursuit, heavy footsteps and whispers of voices echoed from behind them. The vampires were getting closer. The princess led him through a hidden door into a small maintenance corridor. The walls were dull and unadorned here, the polished sheen of the upper levels replaced with cold, metallic surfaces. They moved quickly, ducking through hidden passageways and twisting hallways, the sounds of the vampire's pursuit growing louder. Gabriel's heart raced. He had never been in a situation like this before. His life had always been simple. Deliver a package, get paid, and stay out of trouble. But now, it felt like the world had shifted beneath his feet, and he was caught in something far bigger than he had ever imagined. The princess, who had once seemed so distant and untouchable, was now his only ally, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow tied to her fate. They reached a small, unmarked door, hidden behind a pile of metal crates. The princess reached into a hidden pocket of her gown and produced a small, sleek device. She pressed a button, and the door slid open with a quiet hiss. Inside was a small, almost sterile room, with sleek control panels and a single escape pod waiting in the center. The pod looked ordinary enough, round, metallic, with a single hatch, but Gabriel knew it wasn't. It was their only chance to get out of the city before the vampires caught up with them. The princess stepped inside without hesitation, her movements swift and practiced. Gabriel followed her, his eyes darting around the pod, his mind racing. The princess turned to face him once they were both inside, her eyes scanning him carefully, as if she were reading him. "You have to understand," she said, her voice serious. "This isn't just about you anymore. This is about the galaxy." Gabriel blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "What?" She gestured toward the package, which was still clutched tightly in his hands. "That artifact, you're carrying, the reason they're after you, it's not just a relic. It's the key to something ancient. Something that could change everything." Gabriel's mind raced. "But I'm just a courier. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want any part of this." The princess's eyes softened, but there was still a hint of resolve in her gaze. "I understand. But you were chosen for a reason. That package, it holds the key to unlocking the hidden truths of our galaxy. And the vampires, my enemies, they'll stop at nothing to get it." Gabriel didn't know how to respond. He was a simple courier, a man who had never asked for anything more than to do his job and go home. But now he was caught in the middle of a war he didn't understand, carrying an artifact he knew nothing about. And worse still, the princess, the one person who might be able to explain it all, was a vampire, someone he had been taught to fear. "I don't understand," Gabriel said again, his voice quieter this time. The princess looked out of the pod's window, her expression distant for a moment. "A long time ago, before the vampires retreated into the shadows, We were not the creatures of darkness that many think we are. We were guardians, protectors of an ancient power that kept the galaxy in balance. She turned back to face him, her eyes intense. The artifact you carry holds the key to the hidden history of the vampires. It's a map, a guide to a place where the first vampire civilization was born. And if it falls into the wrong hands, if my enemies get their hands on it, they'll use it to destroy everything we know. Gabriel's head spun. He couldn't keep up with her words. Ancient vampire civilizations, guardians, maps, it all sounded like something out of a fantasy novel. But looking at her, seeing the seriousness in her eyes, he knew she wasn't lying. He glanced at the package again, his mind racing. What was he carrying? Why had he been chosen to deliver it? And why did it feel like his whole life had led to this moment? Before he could say anything, the door to the pod slammed shut with a loud thud, and the entire ship shuddered as if it were under attack. Gabriel's heart leapt into his throat, and he heard the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps rushing toward them. The princess moved quickly, her fingers flying over the control panels in front of them. "They've found us," she said, her voice low but urgent. "Hold on tight. Come." The pod suddenly jolted, and Gabriel was thrown back into his seat as the engines roared to life. He grabbed onto the safety harness, his breath coming in short gasps. Through the small window, he could see the gleaming city below them, getting smaller and smaller as they ascended into the dark sky. It was too late to turn back now. The princess's hands moved with practiced precision, her focus unshaken by the danger they were in. Gabriel watched as she navigated the pod through the crowded airspace, dodging larger ships that towered over them like giants. The sky outside was a sea of lights, a mixture of stars and city lights. It felt like they were flying through another world. Suddenly, a flash of light cut through the sky, bright, blinding, and powerful. Gabriel barely had time to react before the pod was rocked by an explosion. The force threw him against the side of the cabin, and he heard the princess gasp as the pod was thrown off course. "They're attacking us," she muttered, her voice tight with strain. Gabriel's heart hammered in his chest as he looked out the window, his eyes wide in disbelief. A sleek, black ship was on their tail, moving fast, its weapons firing at them with deadly precision. The vampires were relentless. The princess's hands flew over the controls again, her face set with determination. "We need to lose them," she said. "Hold on." Gabriel gripped the safety harness as the princess slammed the pod into a sharp dive. The world outside became a blur of stars and darkened sky as they plummeted toward the surface below. Gabriel's stomach lurched as they twisted and turned, narrowly avoiding blasts from the pursuing ship. He looked back at the princess. She was calm, her eyes fixed on the controls, her movements smooth as she guided the pod through the chaos. But Gabriel could see the strain in her face. The pressure of the situation was taking its toll on her. "We can't outrun them forever," he said, his voice barely audible over the roar of the engines. The princess didn't answer immediately. She seemed lost in thought for a moment, calculating their next move. Then, with a determined look, she spoke. "We don't need to outrun them. We just need to outsmart them." With a final maneuver, the princess flipped a switch on the control panel, and Gabriel felt the pod's engines cut off, plunging them into a brief silence. The pursuit ship whizzed by them, missing them by mere meters. The princess turned to him, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Now, we wait." But Gabriel wasn't so sure. The vampires would never stop coming for them, and this was only the beginning. The pod floated in the silence of space, its engines powered down, and Gabriel's heartbeat was the only sound he could hear. He didn't know how much time had passed. The pursuit ship, sleek and dark, had shot past them, but they hadn't been able to shake them for long. The princess had acted quickly, cutting the engines and hiding in the shadow of a nearby asteroid field. But it wasn't a permanent solution. Gabriel could feel the tension hanging in the air. "We're not safe yet," the princess murmured, her voice calm but laced with urgency. She was staring out of the small window, her eyes focused on the asteroid field ahead. "They'll be back," And when they do, we'll have to make a choice. Gabriel leaned forward, gripping the edge of his seat. What kind of choice? She didn't answer immediately, her fingers tracing the edge of the control panel as if she were weighing options. Finally, she turned to face him, her expression serious. The choice between protecting the artifact and protecting ourselves, she said. We can't outrun them forever. Eventually, we'll have to face them. And when we do, you'll have to decide if the artifact's worth the price. Gabriel's mind raced. What do you mean, the price? Her gaze softened, and for a moment, she looked almost human. Like someone who had carried the weight of the universe for far too long. The artifact is the key to a power unlike anything we've seen. It's not just a map, it's a doorway to a hidden galaxy, where the first vampire civilization once thrived. But the vampires who pursue us want it for a different reason. They want to use it to dominate the galaxy, to rewrite the very fabric of reality. Gabriel could feel his stomach tighten. He had no idea what the princess was talking about. All he knew was that he had been thrust into something he didn't understand, a war between ancient forces, where he was the unwilling player. They'll come for us again, she continued. But this time, it'll be worse. They'll use everything at their disposal to break us. We can't let them get the artifact. Gabriel swallowed hard, his fingers tightening around the package that still sat beside him. But how do we stop them? The princess stood up, moving gracefully to the controls. We don't stop them. We fight. And we use the artifact to our advantage. He shook his head. You're asking me to use it? You said it was too dangerous. She turned to him, her eyes intense. It is dangerous, but it's our only chance. The artifact isn't just a tool, it's a weapon that can change the course of this war. Gabriel wanted to argue, to ask her what kind of weapon they were talking about, but something in her eyes stopped him. He could tell she wasn't lying, but there was more to the story, more that she wasn't telling him. I didn't ask for this, he muttered, his voice raw. I'm just a delivery man. The princess's gaze softened. I know. But sometimes, fate chooses us for things we never asked for. And sometimes, we have to make the hard choices, whether we're ready or not. Before he could respond, a flicker of movement caught his eye. The pursuit ship had returned. Its sleek form cut through the darkness, moving fast toward them. Its weapons primed and ready. The princess wasted no time. Hold on. She slammed her hand down on a button, and the pod lurched forward, sending Gabriel back against his seat. The engines roared to life, and they shot out of the asteroid field like a comet. The pursuit ship followed, its blinding weapons lighting up the dark void of space. Gabriel's heart pounded in his chest as he gripped the safety harness. They were too close now. The ship was gaining on them. The princess's fingers moved rapidly over the controls, making small adjustments to their course, trying to outmaneuver the enemy ship. Gabriel could see the glowing energy blasts streaking through space, narrowly missing them. They're not giving up, Gabriel shouted, his voice strained. What now? We fight, the princess replied through gritted teeth. Brace yourself. Without warning, the princess pulled the pod into a steep dive. Gabriel's stomach dropped as they plummeted toward a massive space station below them. The lights of the station flickered in the distance, a sprawling network of platforms and docks. But there was no time to explain. They were headed straight for it, using the station as a shield. The pursuit ship followed, its weapons firing relentlessly. Gabriel could see the explosion flashes in the distance as the energy blasts collided with the station's surface. They were too close now. Too close to escape. The princess glanced at Gabriel one last time. Get ready. She spun the pod sharply, maneuvering them into a narrow docking bay just as the pursuit ship unleashed another barrage of fire. Gabriel held his breath, waiting for the worst. The pod barely squeezed through the docking doors, just as the ship's blast hit the opening, causing a violent tremor. The entire station shook as the energy blast slammed into the docking bay's shields. Gabriel gasped for air, his hands still gripping the seat. His head was spinning, and he felt a sharp pain in his side from the sudden pressure. The princess wasted no time. She reached over and grabbed the artifact from Gabriel's hands. "We're not safe here," she said, her voice urgent. "We need to get to the central control room. We can't stay in this docking bay for long." Before Gabriel could ask more questions, she was already out of the pod, her movements swift and purposeful. He followed her, still reeling from the close call. They ran down narrow hallways, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness of the station. The once bustling space station now felt like a ghost town, the air thick with tension and uncertainty. "What's the plan?" Gabriel asked, trying to catch his breath. The princess didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted around as they moved, constantly checking their surroundings. "We'll use the artifact to activate the station's ancient defense systems. There's a hidden control room here, one that hasn't been used in centuries. But it's our only chance to fight back." They reached a steel door at the end of the hallway. The princess swiped a small device across the door's scanner, and the heavy door slid open with a low hiss. Inside was a room filled with old, dust-covered consoles. Screens flickered weakly, showing maps of the station and distant parts of the galaxy. The princess approached the central console and plugged the artifact into the main terminal. Gabriel watched, his eyes wide as she typed a series of commands into the system. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice rising with concern. "I'm activating the defense systems," she said, her tone grim. "This station was once a fortress. We'll use it to turn the tide. To buy us enough time to escape." The screens flickered again, then went dark. Gabriel's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, he thought they had failed. But then, the screens lit up once more, this time showing the pursuit ship, moving closer. "We don't have much time," the princess said, her voice sharp. "The ship is almost here. We have to act now." With a deep breath, she pressed a final button on the console. A low hum filled the room, and Gabriel felt a shift in the air, like something ancient had been awakened. The screens in front of them came to life, showing the vast weapon systems of the station activating. Massive energy cannons powered up, their barrels glowing with raw power. The pursuit ship was getting closer. But now, it would face something far more powerful than the princess and Gabriel. The station was ready. Outside, the pursuit ship appeared on the screen, its weapons firing one final shot. But before it could reach them, the station unleashed its full might. A massive blast of energy shot out from the station's cannons, hitting the pursuit ship head-on. The explosion lit up the station's interior, and Gabriel flinched as he watched the enemy ship disintegrate in the blast. The room fell silent. For the first time in what felt like days, Gabriel could finally breathe. But he knew this wasn't over. The battle was just beginning. The artifact had shown them a glimpse of its power. But now, there was no turning back. The vampire war had only just begun.